La libertad de prensa, amigos, es uno de los pilares que sostienen la democracia estadounidense y el periodismo local se ha convertido en la primera línea de defensa de esa libertad de expresión y del derecho a informar, contando historias de sus comunidades, fiscalizando al poder más cercano y además mantener viva esa conexión entre la gente y la verdad. De eso hemos hablado mucho durante estos días. En esta parte de la jornada queremos invitar a la CEO de Texas Tribune. Ella es una referente en innovación y modelos de medios sin fines de lucro, innovación con propósito público. Queremos darle la más cordial bienvenida. Aplauso que ya tomaron café. A Sonal Shah. Bienvenida, Sonal. Thank you. Y este será un panel de dos mujeres, una conversación entre dos mujeres. Queremos invitar a continuación a la directora regional de AFP para América Latina. Ella ha liderado la transformación digital y también la verificación de contenidos de una de las agencias más importantes del mundo. Vamos a recibir con entusiasmo también a María Lorente. María, gracias por estar con nosotros y bienvenida.
Sonal, welcome. Thank you for being here. What an honor for me and for everyone here. So let's start with the big picture, Donald Trump. In recent months, Donald Trump's attacks on the press have escalated from multi-million-dollar lawsuits to personal targeting to journalists and threats to revoke broadcast licenses and visas. Do you see this as a continuation of his previous tactics or a dangerous new phase?
First of all, Maria, thank you. It's an honor for me. And I appreciate everything that you do and continue to do. And a huge thank you to IAPA for inviting me. You know, I think this is an implementation of what President Trump started in 2016. And he talked about it in 2016, and it's become implemented in 2024 and 2025. So I think this is now using the full power of the United States and all of the tools that he has to execute on a strategy and a plan, which he has been basically talking about for a long time. He's been talking about why we shouldn't trust the press for a very long time, not just 2016, but before then. And over the years, the erosion of trust has only continued.
And do you see that, would you agree that erosion of trust is the most corrosive threat?
I think we see it around the world, and all of the conversations today we're talking about the same thing, which is the erosion of trust in the media has been significant over the years. In the United States, it's happened because local press has also died. So there's not enough local press available, so it's all nationalized press in local communities. And that has created a loss of trust generally in what is journalism or what is even good journalism. And I think you and I were talking about this earlier. With information becoming so readily available, people don't know what is good press and what is information and what is just something posted online. And that has only compounded the problem of loss of trust.
Exactly. So as news organization, journalists, what can we do to counteract this narrative?
You know, We have tried, I can tell you what we're doing. I can't certainly speak for every news organization, but I think really reimagining what trust looks like in an era of too much information. Like, we're competing against our telephone. We're not competing against other news or against everything else. We're competing against the attention of the telephone and everything that's on this little computer that we have. And I think one of the best ways of reassembling trust is being available and doing it in local communities. So for us, making sure that we're seen in community, we're actually in the communities talking to people, and really thinking of ourselves. In fact, what that last report talked about is public interest. We are a public interest organization that is serving local communities, and the more we can build trust there, the more people know that they can come and talk to us. So for us, we're a statewide news organization. We cover the whole state, but now we're starting local news organizations in cities. So we can be seen in those communities, and people can find journalists and talk to the journalists and know that there is a place to go to have a conversation. But I believe that there's a huge opportunity to rebuild trust, and I don't think we should give it up just because everybody says no one trusts the media.
You were saying before when we were talking that as journalists, we cover too much, or we give too much attention to whatever Trump says. So what should we do?
And it's been interesting, I think watching over the last few years, last year, at least, and this year, the president loves attention. And whenever he doesn't have it, something more outrageous comes out, and then we give it. And but this is my view. I think we should be reporting on what's happening in the United States, whether it's what's happening in communities, what's happening with prices, what's happening with healthcare, what's happening with loss of housing, and less about everything he's saying every day. And I think it would be a different conversation. However, we are all trained to cover the government, and the government is the president and what he says. And maybe if we thought about it slightly differently and said our job is to serve the public and not just the presidency and the government, but if we're serving the public, what would news look like? What would information look like that is service of the public and less just about government itself? People have lost faith in government for the last 20 years. I worked in government 20 years ago, and people were losing faith in government then. And the more we report on it, the more people have already lost faith. So what can we do to rebuild what the power of people is to change the way government might operate?
Let's talk now about audiences and AI. With AI reshaping how people consume and interact with news, what are some of the pitfalls of AI making editorial choices such as story selection, in-depth coverage, etc.?
Yeah, let me just start with audience first. I think one of the biggest things I have learned here is to pay attention to where is our audience. Who is our audience and where are they? And how do we find them where they are? So for us, generally someone under 35, we are either going to find them on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. They're not coming to a news site. They're not even going to a website. Probably between 35 and 45, they're coming to you via newsletters. Again, not going to a website, but through a newsletter or through Apple News and Smart News. Largely over 55, people will find you maybe on Facebook, or they will come to your news site. So understanding where the audience is probably one of the most important things we can do, and then think about how AI is working with those audiences. So we have a policy on AI, very similar to the AP policy, but it's largely, we will not let AI tell us which stories to write or dictate headlines or things like that. But we do use AI, and we have been using AI for a long time. This is not new. Our journalists use LLM models to dig through our archives. to find information. We recently created an AI chatbot next to a report that we did that allowed users to ask questions of the report so they could get answers. And where they couldn't get the answer, we had it go back to the journalist. So the journalist would find those questions and then answer them if AI couldn't answer it for the person asking. So it became an engagement mechanism. But I think AI is going to change everything about journalism. I think what we know today, and you and I were talking about this, 3 years from now, it's going to be completely different. If 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were asking Google about a term, today people are engaging with AI as a conversation. And so as we think about it from journalism organizations, we have to think about how to have a conversation with people, not just how are they searching for a term. And that's a very different way of operating.
And what other strategies are you exploring to deepen relationships with readers, especially younger generations who have grown up in a social media and AI-driven world?
We're testing, I would say we're testing a lot of ideas. So we just finished a one-year study on how to engage audiences that don't read the news anymore. So what we do is with young people, we're using TikTok and Instagram, but short-form videos, really short videos, less than 2 minutes, usually less than a minute, to engage people. And we found that that has been a highly engaging platform and a way to get people to pay attention to the news. We're also changing the way we do events. We do about 40 events a year. Before, we used to have people come to our office, but nobody wants to come to our office. But we will go to a bar and have an event and do a journalism event there. Or we will go to a healthcare clinic and have an event there. There, people show up and want to have a conversation, but really reimagining where people can come, not just to your office, but to places where it's valuable. And then we're also doing a thing called radical transparency, where we were texting with people during the last election, asking them to ask us any question they might have. And what we actually learned is that what young people were asking were basic civics questions. Why are there so many judges? What do judges do in Texas? Why is this person on the ballot? How come this, what is their job? So when we could answer those questions, it drove them to our website and to read a story. So just really thinking about how do we engage people in different ways where it's not embarrassing for them, but they can understand, we can understand their questions.
Thank you. And let's zoom in a bit and talk about you are leading the Texas Tribune, a pioneer in nonprofit journalism. As we're saying, audience behaviors and funding landscapes evolve. How are you rethinking your business models?
Yeah, the Texas Tribune was started as a nonprofit, so we've never depended on any one donor or one organization for our funding. We are 25% funded by foundations, 25% funded by individuals that give us basically more than $5,000 a year, 35% from sponsorships of events or our digital site, and 10% from membership, and some little odds and ends other places. But one of the things that we're doing more and emphasizing even more is membership. So people that pay less than $100 a year that are willing to pay just out of because they read the news and because they do that, it's only 10% right now. But if we could increase that to 25%, that would be a significant jump for us. But Texas has 33 million people. If 250,000 people became members at $100 per person, let's just assume that as a base, that's $25 million. And so how do we engage with people directly and not be dependent on other money? And actually, this credit I have to give to Rosenthal, because when he served on my board, if there's one thing he would tell me on my all the time is do membership, do membership, do membership. And 3 years later, we're finally doing it, but it's something that's super important. But it's a way to directly engage with people. So as we think about what's the model that we could reimagine for ourselves is how do we have a direct relationship with our consumers, not do it through a platform.
We have spoken a lot about polarization here in these previous sessions. How can organizations like yours help resist divisive national narratives?
We pay a lot of attention to language. So I think there are three things we can do. One thing we don't do is we don't do any opinion pieces. We don't do any editorial pieces. We just report on the news. And we're very clear about that's our job, is just to give you the information as you need it and not what somebody wants you to say or doesn't want you to say or anything like that. Just gives you straight facts and you can make the decisions for yourself. Secondly, we're working with some colleagues at University of Texas to understand language. What kinds of language is divisive and what kinds of language is not divisive, to understand that. So for example, when we did that report on education vouchers, we found that if we just use vouchers, a portion of our audience didn't even read the report, even though it was valuable to them, if we didn't use the term education savings account, which is what the government used. So we used both words and explained why we used one term versus another, and that got more people to read that report because of those terms. So how do we make sure that the language we use gets people to read what is a good article, not get caught up in what is divisive language or what is being used as political language? And how do we think about that? So we're paying attention to it. I know that there was recently a report that came out that talked about different language, that terms like, billionaire is divisive in Texas. And so how do we use different terms that doesn't create a divisiveness?
You mentioned transparency before. What role does transparency in funding, reporting, and editorial choices play in all this effort?
So a few things. Every donor that we have is transparent on our website. You can find every donor over the last 15 years that has ever donated to the Texas Tribune. It matters because we can tell the public that we're not hiding from who's donating to us and we're not beholden to any one donor. The other piece on transparency is explaining to people how our journalism works. So more and more we're finding our newsletter writer introduces themselves as who they are, where they came from. So when they're having these conversations, when they're writing it, it creates a sense of trust of who they are and why they are. And then some of our journalists that go on to TikTok or Instagram or do short form videos also talk from their personal perspective, not personalizing a story, but they tell them who they are and why and where they are. And that has built trust with people. And I think people feel like we're at least being transparent, not just about what we're writing, but how and why we got to a story that we did. And it's slow, but we have to build that trust in a small way.
And you were talking about different things you have done. Can you share an example where local reporting directly impacted community decision-making or policy?
Yeah. So this year, our legislature meets once every 2 years for 6 months. So this year was a year that we had 22 bills in the state legislature this year that cited the Texas Tribune as the reason for why they put the bill in. And one of them was on water. So we did 16-part series on water in Texas, West Texas, East Texas, South Texas. And that directly impacted how the state decided to fund water this year. And I think they put in $1 billion a year for the next 20 years to fund water infrastructure across the state. But because we actually spent time in bringing that story, and we are cited in those bills, which is actually really important for us. And 12 of those bills were Republican bills. So it wasn't just the Democrats or Republicans, it was actually half and half.
Let's talk about your journey. Your career spans tech, the Obama, White House, philanthropy, policy. How does that experience shape how you lead a newsroom at a time of intense political pressure?
It's not a natural journey to come to journalism, but I think what I have learned is each of those jobs, whether I was in technology very early in 2004 or whether in the government, what we call audience in journalism was what I believed in government we were trying to achieve, which is talk to the people and why are we making policies and how are we making policies and who does that impact. And I think what I have learned being here is that this is just one full circle. Journalism doesn't exist without, civic organizations. Civic organizations do not exist without journalism. Whether you're in technology or whether you're in government, we all depend on a version of how information gets out and gets shared and by whom do you trust and how do you trust them. And I think what I bring to this job now is an ability to understand how the different audiences think about journalism and understand journalism. But I can also go talk to philanthropy about why aren't you thinking about journalism in your portfolios? How do you think about it? What are ways you might want to think about it? That we shouldn't be in your communications portfolio, but we should be in your education portfolio, in your healthcare portfolio. It just allows me to open up those conversations because I know who they are.
And in that sense, what sort of partnerships between media and civil society could be formed to help defend press freedom?
It's a hard question. I think this is actually more of a collective action problem, and I don't think journalism by itself can do it alone. I think we need civil society organizations to also stand with journalism, especially when you hear about the number of times journalists are being attacked for telling the truth or telling the stories. Vice versa, many civic organizations are facing the same challenges. If they're standing up to deportations or other things, many of them they're either organizations are being affected. This is an opportunity for us to think, who do we need to collectively work with, whether it's foundations, whether it's nonprofit organizations and journalism organizations, to stand together, to stand for what is both press freedom, but also understanding that role of civic information is so critical for how we have a shared collective understanding of what's happening in the communities around us.
And again, about your experience leading the Texas Tribune, what's one innovation you are most excited about right now?
I think the biggest thing that I am excited about in the work that we have done is, one, we have spent a lot of time building audience. So this year, we have increased our readership by 3 million. And the way we did that wasn't just that we were on more platforms, but that we're building trust with people and that we're seeing people come to us because they understand why we're doing the work that we're doing and leveraging technology where we can. But the short form video has been really valuable for us in building that trust. And secondly, starting these local newsrooms where we are in community with people and they begin to see us in those communities.
You have often described social impact as a long game. What's your long-term vision for journalism role in defending democracy?
For the Texas Tribune, I would love to have more local journalism outlets across Texas. The more we have people in communities talking about journalism, writing about what's happening in their communities, and the more we can create that common conversation, I hope the Texas Tribune becomes the most well-known journalism organization in Texas and that everybody knows who they are. Because the more we're there in those communities, the more we rebuild trust. You don't have to like what we write, but you can tell us and you can find us and you can talk to us about what didn't work for you. And what matters is that we have a two-way conversation, not that you have to like us. Being liked isn't the goal. Having a shared conversation is the goal.
And now this is an existential question. If you have to define success for journalism in 2030, what would it look like?
that there are more, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, local news organizations, very local across the world, that are starting in small ways, but continuing to build trust in those communities. And the more we have it, the more we get beyond this polarization that we have around the world. And we need more shared conversations. Community isn't built on being divisive. Community is built on having a shared agreement and disagreement, but we are actually having a conversation about. I don't have to like the bond issue, but someone else may like it, someone else may not like it, but we should at least understand what the bond issue is, or what the local mayor is doing. If we can do that, I actually think we can rebuild trust. Nothing is trusted today, and that is an opportunity for journalism to rebuild that trust, because you've got to start small, but the momentum builds over time.
Sonal was giving advice to me, to AFP. What advice here, we have lots of media leaders, what advice would you give to innovate in business models, community engagement, and partnerships to flourish?
I think business models are going to change, and I think AI is going to change the business model altogether. And one way we have been thinking about it for ourselves is, to date, we are B2C. We go directly to the consumers as the Texas Tribune. I think in 3 years, it's going to be B to AI to C. And we have to think about, how do people engage with AI, and what kinds of stories will it take for that conversation to happen? Or should we create a chatbot ourselves that can engage with people on a regular basis? I gave you this example. I serve on the board of Consumer Reports. It's a consumer organization that provides consumers information about which products are good or which products are bad, because they test it independent of companies. And Consumer Reports started a chatbot that is called Ask CR. So they're basically integrating AI into that, but they want people to come to Consumer Reports, not go to ChatGPT to get the answers. So how might organizations think about what that looks like, and what is the role of AI in journalism, and how might we all have to think about our business models differently? I don't know what that looks like immediately, but I do think we have to start thinking about that today, not 3 years from now or 4 years from now, because that model is going to change.
And having those bots, those chatbots, would be the only way to survive?
No, I think direct relationship with consumers is actually more valuable than the chatbots. I think people are craving direct information and an ability to have. That's why I think super hyper local journalism matters a lot. Where are you in those communities? Who's talking to that journalist? How do you engage with them? What's a way to do that? Chatbots are one angle on it, but it's not the only thing, and nor should we turn it over to chatbots to have a conversation.
Thank you. I'm going to give time for, I'm sure there are many questions here. I don't know if people have, here's one. Paulo. Presidente, gracias.
Thank you, Sonal and Maria, for such an interesting conversation. I wanted to ask you, Sonal, you said you were excited about bringing up your audience by 3 million. How can you build a figure like that with what you just said, that trust is the most important thing when you have so much competition with social media and AI, etc.? I mean, I would really love to hear you.
Yeah, this year we created a metric for ourselves that our goal is to increase trust with Texans, because that's who our key audience is. When I first came, 30% of our audience was from Texas, 70% was national. And this year we've been really focused, last 2 years we've been very focused on building trust with Texans. So one, making sure that the stories we write are relevant on a regular basis. The events, these events that we do that are very much built on how do we increase trust with local communities has been really important for us. And then I think what we found is that our journalists being on social media has actually been very helpful. And putting our journalists on Instagram and TikTok has probably built more trust than anything we can do. People don't trust institutions, they trust people. And the journalists are more trusted than the Texas Tribune is. So we're really making an effort to make sure that our journalists are seen, our audience knows who we are and what we do and why we're there, and also making sure that our journalists are going out into not just the communities, but making connections in a way that people know who they are in person, not just online and in emails, but really getting out there. So let's hope we can carry this next year. It's an election year, so we'll see how it goes. But this year we were surprised at how much more engagement we have, but partially because we have really made an effort to engage with the audience on a regular basis, and we've made the effort to try different models of engagement. And as that improves, we're doubling down on it.
Thank you. We have time for questions.
Thank you. Armando Castilla. I'm a neighbor in Coahuila for Texas, and we're sister cities, Austin. And how do you measure, as being a nonprofit, your success in a better city, in a more, your community is more well informed, or what's the KPI that gets in your mind or in your team, saying, hey, we're doing a good job and we're going through a good path or not? Because I seen Austin's growth, and the problems that I see in Austin are very public, like lots of traffic. Well, you know more of that. How you see that? How you see if you are going forward or you're happy of what's been measured or something?
No, great question. It's two parts for us. So one part is a statewide question. So while we're based in Austin, we really report about the state. And most of our reporting to date has been covering the state legislature and what the state legislature is doing in Texas. And then we translate that back to people and what those policies mean. What we are starting now is a local newsroom in Austin that's really focused on what do Austinites care about. So we did an audience study about what is it that Austinites care about. Transportation was a big one. Housing is second. Third is education and what's happening in public education. And the fourth is just what growth means for Austin. So our new newsroom is actually focused on those four topics and reporting on those topics. The KPIs for us will be immediately on engagement. How much are we able to build a membership base that is reading our newsletters and our stories on a regular basis? Engagement through direct events that we do, so bringing in people to have those conversations. And we'll use that as a basis to evolve as we continue to learn where our audience is and what we need to do, what platforms we need to be on, and where we're engaging them the most. We're actually starting as a newsletter-first organization, not a website-first organization. So our first product that we will have out in Austin will be a newsletter. And then we'll build a website later, but newsletter and Instagram is where we're starting.
We still have, no, we don't. Well, thank you. Oh, there's one more, yes. Okay.
Thank you, Sonal and Maria, for this fascinating conversation. Sonal, you announced you were stepping down in December. I was wondering if you are going to be involved in journalism, civic life after your CEO tenure, and what do you hope the future of the Tribune will be in the future? Thank you. Thank you again.
Well, first, I am excited that our new CEO, her name is Sarah Adler Hartman. She comes from the New York Times in a product background and is an entrepreneur. And I think it is exactly what the Texas Tribune needs, which is somebody really thinking about audience growth as well as subscriber growth, which is where her strength is. And membership is sort of a great way for us to have somebody that has that background and that energy. And she just thinks about audience differently, which I think will be super important for the Texas Tribune. We also have an extraordinary editor-in-chief in Matthew Watkins, who has really taken the reins in the last year and a half and has done an incredible job of building this audience that I've been talking about. And just the stories that have come out have just really built trust across Texas. We've had Republicans break stories with us, Democrats break stories with us. It's been incredible. For me, I will always stay in the civic space because I love public service, anything. And I think really thinking about the link between civics, journalism, and sort of information is sort of where I'm looking at spending my time and thinking about what that looks like in the future. For now, I need to be closer to my parents, which is important. But I'm really excited about where the Texas Tribune is going with Sarah, with the 2 newsrooms that we've started, and a strategy to grow across Texas.
Here it says we have time for one more question. Is there anyone who wants to ask the last question? No? Well, thank you very much, Sonal.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, both of us. Fue una conversación interesante, el cariño, ese olfato en la historia local, en la historia de la gente, cómo recrear esa conexión entre los medios de comunicación y el público. Acá en República Dominicana tenemos muchos casos de éxito de periodistas que cubren la fuente local, la fuente, además que acá la llamamos la fuente de la provincia, y son exitosísimos proyectos, por supuesto que pueden seguir aprendiendo de ejercicios como el que ustedes están haciendo en The Texas Tribune. Miren, en la Sociedad Interamericana de Prensa, nosotros celebramos a quienes desde distintos espacios defienden la libertad de expresión y valoran el papel del periodismo en la democracia. Hoy queremos reconocer a una figura cuya cercanía, apoyo y respeto hacia la prensa han sido un ejemplo constante. Es el momento, amigos, de entregar el premio Gran Amigo de la Prensa. Para ello, yo quiero que nos acompañe acá en el podio el director de Relaciones Institucionales de Infobae. Con una amplia trayectoria en la industria mediática argentina, su experiencia combina estrategia, medios y visión internacional. Es el buen amigo, además de la República Dominicana y de nuestra familia, Pablo de Luca. Un fuerte aplauso para Pablo, por favor, recibámoslo con cariño.
Buenas tardes a todos. En realidad es un verdadero honor presentar hoy el premio Gran Amigo de la Prensa CIP 2025, una distinción que trasciende el simple acto de reconocimiento. Este galardón encarna el espíritu de solidaridad y apoyo que el periodismo necesita para mantenerse vivo. El compromiso de quienes creen en su poder transformador y en su papel indispensable dentro de las democracias modernas. La sostenibilidad de los medios atraviesa hoy uno de los momentos más delicados. Las presiones económicas, los cambios tecnológicos acelerados y la influencia de las grandes empresas del ecosistema digital han redefinido las reglas de juego, poniendo a prueba la independencia y la viabilidad de las redacciones. En ese contexto, el ejercicio del periodismo libre, profesional y comprometido con la verdad se vuelve más necesario que nunca. Y es precisamente estos tiempos de incertidumbre cuando la CIP reafirma en su razón de ser. Creemos con profunda convicción que el periodismo es una piedra angular de la democracia. Es el mejor antídoto para disipar la oscuridad de la desinformación y la voz que da sentido, contexto y poder a la ciudadanía. Por eso hoy nos llena de alegría anunciar que el premio Gran Amigo de la Prensa SIP 2025 se otorga a Redacciones 5G. Representada aquí por el director de Comunicaciones Externas, Sustentabilidad y Medios de Telecom Argentina, mi buen amigo Pedro López Mateu. Este premio representa la más alta distinción que nuestra institución otorga a quienes contribuyen de manera decisiva al fortalecimiento del periodismo en las Américas. Redacciones 5G ha sido mucho más que un colaborador, ha sido un aliado genuino, un socio en la construcción del futuro. Desde su creación, Redacciones 5G ha acercado la inteligencia artificial y la innovación digital a las redacciones, transformando temores en oportunidades. Sus logros hablan por sí mismos. Más de 350 medios de Argentina, Chile, Uruguay y Bolivia. Más de 10.000 periodistas capacitados y 3.000 estudiantes guiados en su formación. Pero más allá de las cifras, lo que nos valora es el espíritu de sus proyectos, la guía de periodismo e inteligencia artificial, sus boletines, podcasts y la Moyo Academy. No solo son recursos, son apoyos concretos para las redacciones que buscan adaptarse y crecer en medio de un entorno en constante transformación. Son la prueba de que el periodismo puede y debe evolucionar sin perder su esencia. En nombre de la CIP, queremos agradecer a todo el equipo de Redacciones 5G por su liderazgo, su visión y su compromiso con el futuro del periodismo. Que este reconocimiento sea también un recordatorio. El periodismo tiene futuro cuando cuenta con aliados auténticos, con quienes creen en su poder transformador. Pedro, felicitaciones.
Muchísimas gracias. En nombre de Telecom Argentina les quiero agradecer a las autoridades de la Sociedad Interamericana de Prensa que nos honran con esta distinción y por la invitación a ser parte de la 81ª Asamblea que es tan determinante cada año para seguir defendiendo la libertad de prensa, impulsando la libertad de prensa y la sostenibilidad de los medios en América. Es un orgullo grande estar hoy acá recibiendo este premio junto al equipo con quienes hacemos Redacciones 5G en Argentina, que están aquí, Leslie y Diego Fantini, que nos acompañan. Redacciones 5G es una propuesta que hacemos junto a periodistas, redacciones y líderes de medios y que venimos impulsando como parte de una decisión estratégica de Telecom. Este año estamos celebrando el 10º aniversario de nuestro programa, que nació con la misión de acompañar la evolución del periodismo y los medios de prensa hacia las nuevas fronteras tecnológicas, que han surgido de una manera tan acelerada y de una manera tan disruptiva en todas partes, ¿no? Las redacciones o las salas de redacción no han sido una excepción. Por eso han afectado tanto a la producción de noticias. Y en ese recorrido, nuestro programa Redacciones 5G, llegamos, como decía recién Pablo, a más de 350 medios de Argentina, Uruguay, Chile y Bolivia, y además a unos más de la región. Son 10.000 profesionales que ya llevamos capacitados de periodismo y de comunicación, y a más de 3.000 estudiantes de comunicación, periodismo y de carreras afines también, a quienes esperamos ver pronto nutriendo las redacciones de nuestros medios. Redacciones 5G es un programa que hacemos con periodistas para periodistas, un espacio de encuentro, reflexión y capacitación sobre las transformaciones de la profesión. En aquellos primeros tiempos nos desafiábamos con workshops sobre los alcances que impulsaban la llegada de Internet móvil a las redacciones con la tecnología 4G. Formamos a periodistas a través de talleres sobre herramientas digitales para la producción de noticias en movilidad. Hoy cualquiera puede realizar prácticamente un programa de televisión con un móvil de telefonía celular conectado a Internet. Hicimos foco en audiencias cuando las audiencias se convirtieron en el centro de la producción de noticias, y hoy ya estamos conversando sobre prompts y los alcances de la inteligencia artificial en las redacciones. Este último año presentamos la guía de periodismo IA para la integración de inteligencia artificial a procesos periodísticos, y que tuvimos el agrado de presentar durante la última asamblea de la CIP en Córdoba, en nuestra querida Argentina. Como ya saben, Es un material de descarga gratuita en 2 idiomas y que invitamos a quien aún no lo conocen a que puedan hacerlo desde nuestro sitio Redacciones 5G. Como también que también puedan familiarizarse con nuestro programa en todos sus espacios de contacto como el newsletter, los podcasts y nuestras redes sociales. En estos 10 años reflexionamos sobre los desafíos, pero más resaltamos las oportunidades y estas oportunidades que trae consigo la innovación en la forma de producir, distribuir y hasta personalizar contenidos periodísticos y el valor que la tecnología genera cuando los medios la incorporan de forma determinante y consciente para conectar con sus lectores. Esa es nuestra convicción y es lo que hoy nos encuentra en esta asamblea. Y con esto remarcamos nuestro compromiso desde Telecom con la evolución del ejercicio periodístico, representado en ustedes, sus protagonistas, en esta asamblea. Es un tiempo que hemos transitado con crecimiento, transformación conjunta y que nos inspira a seguir trabajando juntos. Tenemos una misión que nos moviliza, que es seguir conectando los medios y las noticias con sus audiencias. Cumplimos 10 años de innovación, tecnología y periodismo con nuestro programa y es nuestro desafío seguir acompañándolos frente a las próximas fronteras tecnológicas que surjan, contribuyendo siempre a la sostenibilidad de los medios y convencidos del rol esencial que desempeñan para la democracia. Reitero el agradecimiento entonces a las autoridades de la CIP por esta distinción y deseo que sigamos teniendo una exitosa asamblea anual. Muchísimas gracias.
Hace 10 años, mientras los medios se consolidaban en su modo online, la llegada de Internet móvil
Estamos en vivo, gracias al 4G, no lo podemos creer.
transformó para siempre las redacciones y la producción de noticias. Y las redes sociales activaron una dinámica que lo cambiaría todo. Coberturas con celulares, periodismo móvil y redacciones cada vez más digitales se convirtieron en los temas claves de un periodismo ávido de futuro. En este contexto, nació el programa de formación de Telecom, una apuesta por innovación y tecnología en el periodismo. Con la conectividad como habilitadora, creamos contenidos y propuestas para acompañar la transformación de los medios en Argentina. Talleres presenciales y virtuales en todo el país y la región y la Mojo Academy impulsaron una nueva forma de hacer y contar las noticias. El newsletter mensual y el podcast Redacciones 5G consolidaron una comunidad que reflexionaba mientras lideraba la innovación en los medios. Y para seguir creando redes, lanzamos Telecom ITP, un espacio que conecta a referentes globales y locales para debatir en el presente la evolución del periodismo del mañana. Hoy, la irrupción de la inteligencia artificial generativa abre nuevas posibilidades de potenciar la formación. Y nuestra guía Periodismo IA se volvió una herramienta clave para medios, redacciones y emprendimientos que buscan sumar tecnología a sus procesos de trabajo. Cumplimos 10 años siendo aliados del periodismo y de su rol esencial en la democracia. 10 años pensando el presente e innovando hacia el futuro. 10 años de innovación, tecnología y periodismo. Telecom. Redacciones 5G.
Felicidades a Redacciones 5G. Ese premio se lo llevan a Argentina desde Punta Cana. Nos encanta que así sea. Ha sido, amigos, un día intenso, lleno de ideas, de reflexiones y sobre todo de compromiso. Es la palabra clave. Cada conversación, cada historia, además cada mirada compartida con ustedes hoy nos recuerda que vale la pena defender la libertad, la verdad y el poder transformador de nuestra profesión, la mejor del mundo, como decía el Gabo. Gracias por acompañarnos, amigos, en esta primera jornada de la 81ª Asamblea General de la Sociedad Interamericana de Prensa. Nos vemos mañana para continuar este viaje de inspiración, debate y esperanza. Recarguen energías, prepárense además para un nuevo día de Prensa en Acción. Hoy tienen salida a SVG, deben estar a las 7:15 de la noche en el lobby del hotel para tomar el autobús y mañana desayunito temprano a las 7 de la mañana y nos vemos, si Dios quiere, a las 8:30 de la mañana. Descansen, pásenla bien y si Dios quiere nos vemos mañana por aquí. Chao, chao.